All right, everybody. Finally, the second part of my interview with 2019-2020 AAU Mr. Universe, Doug Brignole. Doug is extremely enthusiastic and he's very into the science of building muscle. And if you liked the first part of the interview with Doug that I posted a couple months ago now, and a lot of you seem to have liked it, which is great. That's very gratifying. And actually, I'm going to communicate that to Doug as well. If you like that interview, I hope you like this one just as much. So here we go. Okay. So yeah, there we go. I know I said I didn't want to take all your time up just asking about technique, but may I
Yeah,
ask
of course.
another
Yeah.
question? All right. There are so many sources of information about bodybuilding and strength training on the web and other places, and so many conflicting sources. But one of the standard bits of wisdom, if we want to call it that, right, is that one has to work any muscle group or large muscle from multiple directions. Like take the pecs, for example. You got to do a flat press and an incline press and a decline press to hit them from all the angles humanly possible.
That's
Is
mostly false.
that
But let me just say that the
okay?
pectoral muscles and the trapezius muscles are the only fan shaped muscles. They're the only
Okay.
ones that pull their operating levers in different directions,
All
right?
right.
Towards whatever. So you've got fibers that go straight and then some that go down. Same with the trapezius. But every other joint, whether it's side deltoid, front deltoid, rear deltoid, triceps, biceps, latissimus mostly to the same degree,
Okay.
they have one best function. So you can do one exercise for all your muscle group except pectorals and trapezius, and you would be just
Okay.
fine. Now, what will surprise you, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers, is this next statement I'm going to make is that, yes, it is true to a degree that you need to do more than one movement for the pecs because the pectoral fibers go in more than one direction.
Okay.
But if you were to stand in front of a mirror and hold your arms out and look at the imaginary line that goes from one shoulder to the other shoulder and ask yourself, how much of my pectoral muscle is above that line versus below that line? You would realize that pretty much zero is above the line.
Yeah,
It's
it's all
all
below
below the
here.
line, right? So
Yeah.
remember what we said earlier, all muscles
Mm-hmm.
pull toward their origin, right? If you move the upper arm bone as you would in a straight press, you're already moving it to the highest part of the sternum. If you move it to an
Okay.
incline angle, you're imagining that there's pectoral fibers on your chin or on your nose, and there aren't any there. So it makes no sense logically to move your arms in an inclined direction unless your arms were connected to your torso halfway between the highest and the lowest part of your pectorals. And they're
And
not.
they're not.
They're connected at the highest part of the pectorals, period. Okay, so yes, there are some clavicular pectoral fibers that are right here. They comprise about 8% of your pectorals, right? Only 8%.
Okay.
And you could say, oh, well, I do inclines for that clavicular muscle. Well, what you would see, and as I have it illustrated in my book, when someone is doing a flat dumbbell press, that clavicle shifts upward like this. And the clavicular pectoral muscle actually engages more during a flat dumbbell press than the highest fibers on the sternum do. But
Huh.
even still, moving your arm in an inclined direction moves it past the clavicle. So if you were wanting to work the clavicular fibers, any front deltoid exercise that moves your arm forward is already moving it toward the clavicle, i.e. the origin of the clavicular fibers. So you're already getting that when you get your front deltoid. They're right alongside each other. They both connect to your clavicle. So there's no reason to do an incline. The two best exercises to do for your pectoral muscle are a slight decline dumbbell press and an extreme decline cable press.
Okay. Well, that brings up the question, how many exercises does one need to do for a given muscle or muscle group? I mean, like
One.
triceps. for example, I mean, if I'm doing tricep
Well,
pushdowns and I'm doing dumbbell skull
well, you need
crushers,
to do one exercise. One exercise.
okay,
But here's the thing is you have to do the best exercise,
right,
right?
yeah,
So let's just say you want to compare a skull crusher or a tricep pushdown. Well, even that's, I have to give you some explanation on a tricep pushdown because where that cable comes from matters. In other words, if you stand far back and it's way out in front of you versus if you turn around, the cable is behind you. I mean, where the direction of resistance matters a lot because the direction of resistance determines the resistance curve of the exercise. And the resistance
okay,
curve is a sequential variations of increases and decreases that occur during an exercise of a muscle's range of motion, right? So muscles have an elastic property to them that dictates that they are stronger when they are elongated and weaker, they have less strength potential when they are shortened and contracted. So you want to select exercises that provide resistance that is greater in the early part of that muscle's range of motion and less resistance toward the end of the range of motion. Okay, so with that in mind, let's look at a tricep kickback, right?
okay,
When your arm is hanging straight down, it is that pendulum hanging in the neutral position. Your elbow's at 90 degrees, which means your tricep is more elongated than it is contracted. It's not as elongated as it would be here, but it's certainly more elongated than it would be here, right? So when you're here, this is where your tricep can lift the most amount of weight and needs the most amount of resistance. And here you're getting zero. And then what happens when you extend and your tricep gets weaker? This lever enters the horizontal maximum position and it overloads the tricep more than it can handle.
huh,
So the tricep kickback is a perfect example of an exercise that's got the completely opposite, completely wrong resistance curve for an ideal tricep exercise. Too little, essentially nothing, in the early parts of the range of motion and far too much at the end of the range of motion. And someone could say,
okay,
well, what if I need resistance at the end of the range of motion? Well, you can actually angle yourself in a way that you don't go to zero at the end of a range of motion. But what's more important is the early phase. What's more important is that you load up that first 1/3 or 1/2 of the range of motion with as much weight as that muscle can handle if you want to make it grow, because that's where the greatest strength potential is. That's why when you're lying on your back with skull crushers, you have more at the beginning and less at the end. And all you have to do is angle yourself a little bit this way to not let it go to zero at the end. So
okay,
that's why I say you can rate each exercise almost on a scale of 1 to 10 for efficiency and productivity. And the idea that you need to constantly change your exercises around for the sake of variety only makes sense if all the exercises you're trading have equal efficiency and productivity. If you're trading from an exercise that rates a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, and you're trading to an exercise that has a 2 or a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, like a tricep kickback, that muscle is only going to notice that it's a less effective, less efficient, less productive an exercise. So when I say,
okay,
yes, do only one exercise, it shouldn't be tricep kickback, right? It
all
should
right,
be a skull crusher or a set up tricep pushdown. So if you do the standard tricep pushdown, you look at someone from the side and they're doing this, right? And the cable is over there, you'll notice that the forearm and the cable are almost parallel in the beginning, which means neutral,
all
right? Which
right,
means you're not getting much in the beginning. You might reach maximum somewhere halfway in between. And when you get to the end, you have some resistance, but still possibly too much, right? So if you turn around and you have the cables coming from behind, you have two cables. Now you can have more resistance at the beginning because the cable and the forearm are more perpendicular and you have less at the end. And now you have a better direction of resistance for a tricep pushdown.
okay,
So what happens a lot of times is you see these bodybuilders that have good success doing conventional exercises the conventional way. But I would argue that the way that conventional traditional exercises are designed are less than maximally effective. So yes, they can get the same end result, but because we're dealing with percentages of effort, they have to do a lot more effort at a lesser percentage to equal the kind of muscle stimulation that you could use with just a better exercise.
okay. Well, I mean, if your life's anything like mine, time is a precious commodity. So it only makes sense to maximize the time that you're spending in the weight room, yes?
It's also wear and tear on your joints. Look, I
I can
mean,
see that.
let's just look at this analogy. Let's just say you're going to drive your vehicle from point A to point B, and you're going
Okay.
to drive on this road, and this road is dirty and muddy and full of rocks.
All
And
right.
you're going to drive through this road, and it's going to bump, and your car's going to get beaten up, and your tires are going to be spinning, which means you're going to be using gasoline without actually getting forward propulsion. And you finally get to the other side.
You've been to my house. That's my house.
Or you could drive from point A to point B on a smooth, dry road. Either way, you get to the other side. But the less efficient, less ideal way is the way that requires more effort because you're less efficient and you get more wear and tear on your vehicle, more gasoline spent, right? More time in getting there. And it's only because you didn't know there was a better way. So that's what's
Okay.
really critically important. Look, I just turned 60 years old and I won Mr. Universe last month, November 2nd, AAU Natural Universe. I train heavy. I train heavy enough to limit me to 4 reps on a given set without any
Really?
joint pain. And people come
Wow.
up to me, they go, I can't train heavy because it hurts my joints. Well, it'll hurt your joints if you're training heavy with exercise that strain the joints. But if you train heavy with exercises that don't strain the joints, your joints won't hurt.
Well, okay, so it sounds like, knowing, learning the physics of fitness, or buying the book and using that knowledge, we can essentially make ourselves a
Yes, and
roadmap.
look, I mean, here's the thing is, I'm not selling a gimmicky kind of thing. I'm explaining that there are about 12 logical principles that must apply in each exercise you do all the time across the board in order to have that exercise be maximally efficient. It's that simple.
Okay.
These are just anatomy facts and physics facts. Nobody's looked at it, or very few people have looked at it quite this way, but it is inarguable. So let's just say you're looking at the bench press and you're going like this, right? And you say, that's a really good chest exercise. And I say, yeah, but have you noticed that you're missing like 30% of the range of motion? Like you have to keep your hands on the bar. And you go, yeah, but it's still a good chest. I go, well, is that last 30% range of motion important or isn't it? If it is, then that's not a good exercise. If it isn't important, then why do the last 30% on any exercise? Right? So
Good
whatever you
question.
apply to one exercise as principles have to apply across the board. Either all limbs move toward the origin of that muscle or they don't. Either all exercises twist a joint or they don't twist a
Or they
joint.
don't. Right.
Either all limbs work in the absence of reciprocal innervation and bilateral deficit and active insufficiency. These are other neurological things that interfere, or they don't. You can literally use logic and physics and anatomy and neurology to quantify every single exercise in the gym and determine how productive, how useful that exercise actually is. And narrow it down to, and I hate to say this, narrow it down to 1 or 2 of the best exercises for each body part. Now, then someone says, so that's all you do? And I go, check out my pictures on my Facebook and you'll see that my physique was championship level, right? And you look at my triceps, 1 tricep exercise for the last 3 years. Bicep,
Really?
1 exercise for the last 3 years. I don't change things around. I don't need to. Look, if
Huh.
you go into the sun with the purpose of getting a suntan, and after, let's say, being out there every day for, let's say, 3 months, you quote plateau, and someone says, hey, you just got to switch things up. Do you think that if you went and started using incandescent light or fluorescent light or neon light, that somehow you'd get a better result? No,
Black light.
because UV light is the best light, right? You're not going to get an improvement just because you switch things up with a lesser version of it, with an inferior version of it. What you do instead is you take a break for a week and then you start over again. Everything is fresh again, right? You're never going to get a better result with an inferior anything, by the way, inferior. Let's just say you say, hey, I'm tired of breathing air. I want some variety. Well, good luck trying to find a better option, right? Bored or not bored, that's what works. Try breathing some helium exclusively,
Or some methane, just
or
for the hell
methane,
of
or
it.
anything you want. It's just not going to, what works, works, period. Nutrition, same thing. If you eat nutritious food, your body's never going to say, hey, I prefer a French fry.
Well, now your
Right?
brain might
It's
say
just,
that. Your
but
emotions might say that. It's comfort
yeah,
food,
your
you
emotions
know.
might say that. Yeah. Physiologically speaking, what's good is good and what's bad is bad, or less productive, less good is what it is.
Okay, I don't know how long we've been talking now. Once we got up and running, what, 45 minutes maybe? I, I'm going to watch just what we've recorded so far. I'm going to watch this over and over again because there's so much to think
And let
about.
me just say that
J-
it
yeah,
may seem a little elusive or a little abstract without having illustrations in front of you. In my book,
yeah.
I have drawings and I show things that are undeniably true. And they allow you to grasp something to a degree that you couldn't grasp just with conversation like this. Like, I'll give you just one quick example. Like, if you're doing a rowing exercise, you might make the assumption that that's working your upper inner back, right?
Right,
But if you
yeah.
look at an anatomy chart and you say, well, what's the biggest part of the upper inner back? You would see it's the middle trapezius,
The trapezius, yeah.
right? And so you say, oh, so it's working my middle trapezius. And I go, but wait a minute. Look where it starts and look where it ends. It starts on the spine. It ends at the outer edge of the shoulder blade. Does not cross the shoulder joint. It does not connect to the arms. So no part of the arm part of rowing involves the middle trapezius. The only
Huh.
reason the trapezius work at all is because, oh yeah, incidentally, you may also be pulling your shoulders back as you're doing the rowing. But how often have you seen someone doing rowing where they don't move their shoulders at all? Which means that they're getting very little, if any, middle trapezius involvement. They're focusing on the arm part of the movement.
They're turning it into a biceps exercise.
It's a rear deltoid exercise.
Rear deltoid. Okay.
Because it's not a bicep exercise. Why? Because the forearm, which is the operating lever of the bicep, is parallel to the direction of resistance and therefore neutral. The upper arm, which is the operating lever of the rear deltoid, is getting perpendicular with the rowing direction of resistance. So that's the lever that's working the most, and whatever muscles are connected to that lever.
Huh. Okay. Okay. Now, Doug, I didn't realize that to order your book, right, The Physics of Fitness, I didn't realize actually, and tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, one has to go to your website, click on the link, and and then they send you an email saying, hey, I want to buy the
Well, they can
book.
do it one of two ways. They can go to the email and
Okay.
just click on buy the book, or they can send me an email and then I'll give them instructions on how to pay by using PayPal. And then I send them a link from Dropbox. So there's just two
Okay.
ways of doing it. But the easiest way is just to go to the website.
Okay. Okay.
But here's the thing I just did a seminar on this very topic in Norway.
Huh.
And what I said to them and what I say to everyone is, I don't want to apologize, but I feel that I have to apologize because I realize that what I'm saying sort of upends a lot of beliefs that people have and leaves them almost more confused than they started. But it doesn't mean that what I'm saying then should be ignored. I mean, this is factual stuff, right? This is stuff that you can corroborate yourself. All you have to do is Google any of the things I discuss in my book, and you'll find evidence of all of it, right? So here's the thing: is what I say to people is, if this book only starts getting you thinking about what you're doing when you're doing resistance exercise, then we're on the right track, right? Because so much of what we do in the weight room is based on emotional choices. If we see Dorian Yates doing something, an exercise in the gym, we make the assumption that because he's extraordinarily well developed, that he must know what he's doing and that must be a good exercise. And that's an emotional decision. That's not a logical, rational, scientifically sound decision.
Sure.
So, a broken clock is right twice a day, right? If you do, 100 different exercises and 30 of them are not so good, they're not going to undo the benefit of the 50 or 60 or 70 good ones. They're just not going to add to it. You've just wasted time and energy doing that, right? So my goal is to get people to understand how not to waste time, how not to waste effort, how not to increase risk of injury, how to be as streamlined, as efficient as possible with the exercises you do select, so you get the most results with the least time in the gym and the least strain on your joints.
That sounds like a noble endeavor to me. Frankly, though, the idea that if you present this info to an audience of people and you get a lot of confused looks, okay, for example, I think I've been following the conversation pretty closely, and I'm confused
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Even though I've been
So,
following it, so I'm
so
going to
here's what
get the
happens, and
book,
this
I'm going to
happens.
read it, and investigate it because
Right.
I mean, education isn't comfortable, right? I mean, I'm a teacher. Students want to learn something, they want to be comfortable with it right away,
But
but
you
it
teach
just
language,
doesn't
right?
work.
You teach English.
Yeah, I teach English. I
So,
talk real good.
well, yeah, right. Well, the reason that I point that out is because it's unlikely that the people who come to you have previously held deep-seated beliefs about how to speak English differently. That does happen in weight training.
There you have it. Second part of the interview with Doug Brignole, current Mr. Universe 2019 to 2020. There's one more interview with Doug coming up, and in these first two interviews, or sections of one, what was really one long interview, we've talked a lot about technique and science and so forth. And in the third part of the interview, we're going to get into some more maybe esoteric things as we talk about, maybe the origin of some of the myths about building muscle and some other things as well. So come on back for the third part of the interview. Hopefully it won't take me as long to get that posted as it took me to get this one up and running. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Talk to you in the next video.